In the heart of the galaxy, a quiet storm brews. The spacecraft Solara, a sleek vessel built for interstellar exploration, drifted through the starlit abyss. Captain Lyra Nova, a woman in her early 30s, stood at the helm, her dark hair flowing in the soft hum of the control room. The glow from the cockpit's array of instruments bathed her face in a cool azure light. She gazed out into the void, her piercing green eyes locked on a distant nebula, a vibrant, swirling mass of gas and dust. "It's closer than I thought," she muttered to herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Commander Idris, a tall man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair, his tone calm yet urgent. "Captain, we're approaching the edge of the nebula. The sensors are picking up anomalies, strange readings. It's unlike anything we've encountered." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, keep the shields up and get a team on standby. I don't want any surprises." The tension in the room grew as the crew braced for the unknown. Lyra clenched her fists, determination etched across her features. The mysteries of the nebula awaited. Lyra's voice cut through the rising hum of the ship's engines as she gave her orders. "All hands brace for impact. Activate shield systems now." Commander Idris worked swiftly, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The ship's hull vibrated with a strange energy as the first signs of the nebula's influence began to touch the Solara. A greenish hue started to shimmer along the edges of the ship, distorting the light around it. "Captain, the energy readings are spiking," Idris said, his voice tinged with concern. Lyra glanced at the view screen, where the nebula's vibrant colors began to swirl and pulse, creating an almost hypnotic effect. "Get us out of here," Lyra ordered, but even as the words left her mouth, she could feel the pull of the unknown force. "We can't maneuver around it, Captain. We're caught in its gravitational field," Idris replied. The tension in the control room thickened as the crew prepared for whatever might come next. The ship groaned as if struggling against an invisible force. The ship's interior was alive with activity. Warning lights flashed red across the control panels as the crew scrambled to stabilize the Solara against the overwhelming force, pulling them deeper into the nebula. Lyra gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white as she fought to maintain control. "Increase power to the thrusters. We need to break free," she shouted. Idris responded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "It's no use, Captain. The energy here is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's pulling us in." Lyra's eyes narrowed, determination flaring. "We're not giving up yet." She leaned forward, hands moving quickly across the console. The ship groaned again, but Lyra's focus never wavered. Outside the viewport, the nebula had become a swirling mass of colors, a storm of cosmic forces that tugged at the very fabric of reality. The crew braced for the next move, not knowing what awaited them in the heart of the nebula. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward as if propelled by an unseen hand. The crew was thrown against their seats as alarms blared. "Captain!" Idris shouted, gripping his station to keep himself steady. "We're being pulled into the heart of the nebula." Lyra's heart raced as she attempted to stabilize the ship. The view outside the viewport showed nothing but the swirling mass of colors, now becoming increasingly turbulent. "We have no choice but to ride it out," Lyra said, gritting her teeth. She locked eyes with Idris, who nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The crew worked together, struggling to keep the Solara intact as the nebula's forces twisted around them. The temperature in the cockpit began to rise as the ship neared the center of the storm. "Prepare for everything," Lyra ordered. "Stay sharp, Itwa." The crew was silent, the weight of uncertainty hanging in the air like a dense fog. The Solara plunged deeper into the nebula's heart. Outside, the storm of light and energy intensified, like a living being threatening to swallow them whole. The ship's systems began to flicker, and Captain Lyra knew they were dangerously close to the point of no return. "Captain, I don't think we can hold on much longer," Commander Idris said, his voice edged with fear. "We need to stabilize or the ship won't survive." Lyra's eyes narrowed in determination. "We're not going down without a fight." She turned to the crew, her voice calm but commanding. "I need every hand on deck. We're going to get out of this." Her resolve resonated through the room as the crew rallied around her. As they worked, the nebula's grip tightened, but Lyra never stopped fighting. With every ounce of her will, she pushed forward. They weren't ready to give up. Not yet. The Solara trembled as it continued its descent into the heart of the nebula. Outside the ship's viewport, the vast swirls of light, gas, and dust danced and pulsed like an otherworldly storm. But inside, the crew worked in a silence that was as heavy as the weight of the unknown. Captain Lyra Nova remained at the helm, her fingers lightly grazing the control console, as if sensing the vibrations beneath the ship's surface. "We're too deep now," Commander Idris said, his voice calm but strained. "If we don't break free soon, we'll be trapped." Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the ever-shifting storm of energy. The crew had prepared for many things, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer force of the nebula's pull. "We need to keep pushing forward," Lyra replied, her voice firm despite the uncertainty swirling around them. "The data we've collected from this region could change everything. We can't turn back." Idris nodded, though the fear was unmistakable in his eyes. The Solara groaned under the pressure as they moved deeper into the cosmic chaos. The ship continued to descend deeper, the nebula's clouds now closing in, obscuring all but the faintest trace of light from distant stars. Every system was strained, and the Solara's crew could feel the weight of each passing second. "Captain, the energy spikes are getting worse. It's affecting the ship's integrity," Idris reported, his voice growing more anxious with each word. Lyra turned to face him, her expression grim but determined. "Do we have enough power to hold the shield steady?" she asked. "Just barely," Idris replied. "But it won't last long." The ship's thrusters hummed as they struggled against the pull of the nebula. Outside, the nebula seemed to stretch, expanding like an enormous cosmic mouth threatening to devour them whole. The crew worked together, but it was clear that the Solara's limits were being tested. Lyra's pulse quickened, but her resolve didn't falter. "Then we have to make it count," she said. "We don't have a second to waste." Captain Lyra paced quickly across the cockpit, her mind racing through every possible solution. The Solara's hull groaned as the energy from the nebula wrapped tighter around them. "We need to get the external sensors online. If we can't see what's ahead, we'll never make it through," she said, her voice steady despite the rising pressure. Idris worked his console furiously, his hands moving over the holographic display with calculated urgency. "I'm trying, but the energy interference is too strong. The sensors keep failing." The ship shuddered as a wave of energy from the nebula slammed into the hull, sending a jolt through the crew. "We need to get to the core," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "It's the only place where we might find the data we need. And what if we can't make it out?" Idris asked, looking up from the console. Lyra turned back to the viewport, her face set in determination. "We will," she said, with the finality of a leader who knew their mission was bigger than the threat they faced. The pressure inside the cockpit was unbearable, as if the entire ship was being crushed under the weight of the nebula's energy. Lyra clenched her fists around the armrests of her chair. "Commander, is there any way to break free?" she asked, her voice tight. Idris hesitated for a moment, scanning the readouts. "We can't break the gravitational field without risking total system failure. We'd lose everything." Lyra's gaze never wavered from the viewport, where the nebula's colors swirled in a chaotic frenzy. "Then we have no choice but to keep pushing forward," she said. Her words were met with silence, but the crew knew the gravity of the situation. Idris's fingers hovered over the console as he debated the options. "We're running out of time, Captain," he said. Lyra nodded. "I know," she replied softly. "But we can't stop now. For the crew, for the mission, we have to keep going." The Solara's engines hummed at maximum capacity, but the ship's progress was slow. The nebula's energy continued to resist them, each wave of energy pushing them further into the storm. "We need to hold steady just a little longer," Lyra said, her voice steady as ever, but her eyes flicked over the ship's diagnostics. Idris worked furiously at his station. "We don't have much time. The shields won't hold much longer, Captain." The crew braced themselves, awaiting the inevitable. "Hold it together, everyone," Lyra said, her voice strong. "We're almost there." Outside the viewport, the nebula's power surged in an overwhelming wave, sending the Solara into a violent spin. The crew struggled to regain control as the stars blurred into streaks. Lyra's hands gripped the console, her mind focused. The Solara was on the brink, but so was the mission. If they didn't succeed now, everything they had worked for would be lost. The Solara spun uncontrollably, its path dictated by the violent forces of the nebula. Inside, the crew fought to keep their footing as the ship rattled. Captain Lyra's fingers flew across the console, desperately trying to regain control. "Shields are failing," Commander Idris said, his voice tinged with panic. "The hull's integrity is at risk. We need to break free now." Lyra's gaze never left the viewport. The nebula's light surged in waves, threatening to consume the ship. "If we keep going at this speed, we'll be torn apart," Idris warned. Lyra's mind raced. She had studied the nebula's energy patterns, but never had she imagined this kind of force. "We don't have a choice," she replied. "We push forward. This ship can take it." She reached out, steadying the shaking console as the Solara lurched again. The crew held their breath. The ship was at its limit, but Lyra knew that if they stopped now, they would never escape. They had come too far. The ship's systems began to fail one by one. The lights flickered in time with the ship's jerks, creating a strobe effect that made everything feel unreal. "I can't keep this up for much longer," Idris muttered. He wiped the sweat from his brow, glancing at the flickering readouts in frustration. "The hull's temperature is rising too fast, Captain. If we don't do something now, the Solara won't make it out." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the approaching storm in front of them, the mass of light and energy that had seemed so far away when they first entered the nebula. Now it loomed large, threatening to swallow them whole. "We can't stop," Lyra finally said, her voice steady but strained. "We push forward, no matter the cost." She looked at Idris, then at the rest of the crew, who were all silently bracing for the impact. "Whatever happens, we make it out together." The ship lurched again, and the crew held on tight. The Solara plunged deeper into the heart of the storm, the power of the nebula now fully encompassing them. Every fiber of the ship was straining against the crushing energy that surrounded them. The crew was silent now, each person lost in their own thoughts. But they all shared one thing in common: the knowledge that survival was no longer certain. "We're almost there," Lyra said, her voice the only sound in the cockpit, cutting through the tension like a blade. She stared out the viewport, watching the swirling mass of cosmic forces in front of them. "If we can just hold on for a few more minutes, we might make it to the core." Idris looked at the viewport as well, seeing only the swirling colors and streaking light. "But Captain, what if the core is worse?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "We're making this our chance, Idris. We fight until we have no fight left." The ship groaned under the pressure, but Lyra's resolve was unwavering. Suddenly, the Solara was engulfed by a violent wave of energy from the nebula. The ship lurched and shuddered as if it were a mere leaf in a storm. The alarms blared, signaling the breach of the ship's outer hull. "We're losing control," Idris shouted. Lyra was thrown forward into the console, but she quickly recovered, her hands steady as she reactivated the navigation system. The ship's exterior was being battered by unseen forces, and the energy from the nebula was seeping through the hull in flashing bursts. "Reinforce the shields now," Lyra commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. She braced herself as another violent tremor shook the ship. The hull groaned, and for a moment the Solara felt like it might break apart. "All systems are failing," Idris said. "We're running out of time." Lyra's eyes locked on the storm outside. "We don't have time for that," she said, determination flooding her voice. "We fight, that's what we do." The Solara was on the brink. The crew had never been so close to the edge. Captain Lyra could feel the walls of the ship straining under the pressure. The shields were barely holding, and the core of the nebula was looming just ahead. "We're almost there," Lyra whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the sound of the ship's groaning systems. "Hold on." She turned to Idris, her face grim. "If we don't make it through this, I want you to know you've done everything you could." Idris looked back at her, his face worn with exhaustion, but his eyes still filled with a spark of hope. "We all have," he said quietly. As the final burst of energy from the nebula hit the ship, the Solara groaned one last time before it plunged into the heart of the storm. Outside, the nebula swirled, its colors flashing violently. The Solara disappeared into the center, lost to the chaos. The Solara emerged from the heart of the nebula, but the crew was far from relieved. They found themselves in an entirely different realm, a cosmic sea of swirling gas and light, with no discernible direction. The ship's systems had been battered, and their instruments barely functioned. "Where are we?" Commander Idris asked, his voice filled with both awe and confusion. Lyra stood at the helm, staring out into the vast unknown. The nebula was still visible behind them, but they were now surrounded by an unfamiliar cosmic expanse, an endless sea of glowing particles. "We've crossed into another part of the galaxy," Lyra said, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. "It's unlike anything we've ever seen." The ship's hull creaked under the strain, but Lyra didn't flinch. "We're alive. That's what matters," she said, as much to herself as to the crew. But deep down, she knew that survival was only the beginning. There were new dangers ahead, and they had no idea what lay in this strange region of space. The crew worked feverishly to restore what they could of the ship's systems, but progress was slow. "We're lucky the shields held up," Idris said, wiping his brow. "If they hadn't, we wouldn't have made it." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the dim, flickering screens in front of her. "Lucky won't get us far. We need to find out what this place is and why it's here," she replied. A sudden crackle on the communication system interrupted their thoughts. "Captain, I'm picking up a strange signal," one of the crew members reported. Lyra's attention snapped to the console. "Show me," she ordered. The signal was faint but distinct, a rhythmic pulse coming from somewhere in the void. It didn't seem to be coming from any known source, and it wasn't anything the crew had encountered before. "What do you make of it?" Lyra asked, her voice steady. Idris examined the signal. "It's not human-made," he said. "But it's definitely something, or someone, we need to investigate." The Solara changed course, following the strange signal. The crew had no other option, they had to know what it was. Lyra remained at the helm, her expression steely as the ship cruised through the unknown expanse. "I don't like this," Idris said, his voice filled with unease. "We're heading straight into the heart of something we don't understand." Lyra's lips tightened. "We don't have a choice. We follow the signal, and we get answers." As the ship advanced, the signal grew louder, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost like a heartbeat. "We're close," Lyra said, her voice low. The air in the cockpit seemed to thicken as the ship inched closer. The crew was tense, bracing for what they might find. "Keep your eyes sharp, whatever's out there, we're not alone," Lyra warned. Outside the viewport, the cosmic expanse seemed to close in on them, the particles swirling more aggressively. The Solara was nearly upon the source of the signal when it happened. A sudden violent energy pulse surged out of nowhere, slamming into the ship. The Solara rocked violently, alarms blaring as the systems went haywire. "Brace for impact," Lyra shouted, her voice barely audible over the deafening sound of the ship's hull groaning under the strain. The crew gripped their stations as the ship fought against the pulse. "Shields are at 30%. Idris yelled. "If we don't stabilize, we'll lose them." The pulse continued, each surge harder and faster than the last. Lyra's hands flew over the console, her focus absolute as she tried to bring the ship back under control. "Hold on!" she shouted to the crew. They were in the heart of the storm now, surrounded by a strange unseen force that neither the crew nor the ship could fully comprehend. But they were far from giving up. After what seemed like an eternity, the pulse finally subsided. The Solara's systems, though damaged, managed to stay functional. The crew was shaken but still intact. Lyra let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "Status report," she ordered. Idris, still scanning the data, nodded. "We're alive," he said, his voice rough. "But barely. The shields are down to 12%, and we've lost some of the navigation systems." Lyra nodded. "We're in the unknown now," she said, staring out at the cosmic expanse. "But we're not stopping. We press on." The ship's lights flickered once more, but the crew knew that there was no turning back. Whatever lay ahead, they had come too far to quit. Outside the viewport, the strange glowing signal pulsed once more, beckoning them forward into the unknown. The Solara drifted further into the unknown expanse, its damaged systems struggling to keep up with the crew's relentless pursuit of the mysterious signal. As the ship coasted through the cosmic particles, the crew worked tirelessly to make repairs. Lyra remained focused at the helm, but her mind was elsewhere, lost in the thoughts of what they might find. "We're approaching something," Commander Idris said, breaking the silence. He stepped closer to Lyra, pointing at the sensor readout. "This isn't just a signal. It's a source, a structure of some kind." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "A structure? Out here? It's hard to say, but it's definitely artificial." The ship's lights flickered slightly, but the crew remained steady. The strange signal pulsed more intensely now, almost as if it was calling them. "Prepare for an approach," Lyra commanded. "Whatever it is, we need to see it for ourselves." As the Solara moved closer, the outline of the structure became clearer, its edges glowing with an unnatural light. The crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The ship approached the structure with caution. The glowing mass in front of them was unlike anything they had ever encountered, an alien creation, its surface shimmering with an unearthly glow. "What is this thing?" Idris whispered, almost to himself. Lyra stepped forward, eyes fixed on the unknown structure. "It's a structure, all right," she said quietly, "but it's unlike anything we've ever seen." The structure was enormous, spanning the horizon in front of them, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with life. As the Solara came closer, an energy field began to surround the ship, a low hum vibrating through the cockpit. "We're too close," Idris said, concern creeping into his voice. "We need to pull back." But Lyra didn't move. Her mind raced with the possibilities. "I can't pull back now," she replied. "We need answers." The ship continued forward, the energy field growing more intense as they approached the structure. It was as if it was waiting for them. Suddenly, the Solara lurched violently. The energy field surrounding the structure began to interact with the ship's systems, causing alarms to blare throughout the cockpit. "What the hell is happening?" Idris shouted as the controls became unresponsive. Lyra gritted her teeth, trying to regain control, but the ship was now fully ensnared by the energy field. The ship's systems flickered and buzzed, struggling under the force. "We're being pulled in," Idris yelled, clutching his station. Lyra slammed her fist on the control panel, but nothing happened. The Solara continued to drift toward the structure, the mysterious energy field tightening around them. "We need to get out of here," Idris shouted. Lyra's jaw clenched as she fought to steady the ship. "We're not leaving," she said, her voice icy with resolve. "Not until we know what this is." Outside the viewport, the glowing structure loomed ever larger, its pulsing energy field dominating the view. The Solara was now fully within the structure's energy field, and the crew had no choice but to brace for whatever was coming next. "Prepare for impact," Lyra shouted. The ship's hull groaned as the field's energy surged through it, rattling every system. The structure ahead was now impossibly close, and Lyra could see the intricate carvings on its surface, glowing and shifting with every pulse of energy. "This is it," Idris muttered, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "Whatever this is, it's not natural." Lyra didn't respond. Her mind was focused entirely on what they had to do next. "We're not leaving until we understand what's going on," she said firmly. The ship shook again, and the crew held tight as the Solara seemed to hover, trapped in the grip of the energy field. We need to know if this is the answer, Lyra added. If this is what we've been searching for. Outside the viewport, the structure seemed to come alive, its pulsing light filling the cockpit with an eerie glow. The Solaris systems finally stabilized, but the crew was far from relieved. The ship was now locked in a strange, vibrating stasis, held captive by the structure's energy. "We're completely at its mercy," Idris said quietly, his hands still gripping the console. "I don't know how much longer we can stay like this." Lyra stood at the helm, her eyes locked on the structure outside. "We wait," she said, her voice calm despite the rising tension. "If this structure has answers, we need to be ready to receive them." The energy field surrounding the Solara pulsed once more, sending a shudder through the ship. It was as if the structure was aware of their presence, reacting to the ship in some unknown way. "I don't like this," Idris muttered. "We're being pulled into something we can't control." Lyra didn't flinch. "We'll make it work," she said firmly. "We're not leaving without answers." The ship hummed in silence as they awaited whatever the structure would reveal next. The Solara remained trapped within the structure's energy field, but the crew could feel the ship systems beginning to hum with strange new life. The energy that held them in place seemed to be syncing with their own power systems, creating an odd harmony between the ship and the alien structure. "It's like it's communicating with us," Commander Idris said, his voice filled with astonishment. Lyra stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the structure as its pulsing energy intensified. "I think it is," she replied quietly. The ship's lights flickered in rhythm with the pulse, almost as if they were becoming part of the same energy field. This is beyond anything we've encountered," Idris continued, still captivated by the strange synchronicity. "We don't understand it, but it's responding to us." Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the shimmering alien surface. "We need to learn more," she said firmly. "Whatever this is, it's the key to what we've been searching for." The crew fell silent, each of them contemplating the magnitude of their situation, waiting for what would come next. The longer they remained within the structure's grasp, the more the crew could sense something profound occurring. "It's as if the ship is adapting to the environment," Idris said, his voice trailing off as the ship's systems began to operate more smoothly. Lyra watched the external viewport, her eyes narrowed with concentration. The alien structure's energy seemed to be shaping the environment around them, creating a zone of stability for the Solara. "This can't be accidental," Lyra said quietly, almost to herself. "It's like the structure wants us here." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each person acutely aware that they were standing at the threshold of something entirely unknown. "What if this is a test?" Idris asked. "What if we're being watched, measured?" Lyra didn't look away from the viewport. "Whatever it is," she replied, "we're not turning back. We stay the course." Outside, the structure pulsed once more, its energy field now emitting a soft, almost melodic hum, as if beckoning them forward into the unknown. The crew began to feel the weight of the silence that had settled over the Solara, as the ship remained entranced by the energy field. Time seemed to stretch, the outside world beyond the ship's hull, nothing but a glowing, pulsating abyss. "It's like we're in another dimension," Idris said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and fascination. "A pocket of space and energy where nothing behaves the way it should." Lyra's eyes remained locked on the structure, her mind racing through the possibilities. "This is where we need to be," she said with quiet certainty. "If we can understand this structure, we'll understand everything." A series of soft beeps came from the console as new data began to flow in. Idris quickly scanned the readouts. "Captain, I'm picking up new signals. This structure is emitting some sort of communication. It's directed at us." Lyra's heart raced. "Can we respond?" she asked. "I don't know," Idris replied, his fingers moving rapidly over the console. "But we're going to find out." The Solara's systems hummed in a synchronized rhythm with the pulsing energy from the alien structure. "The signals are becoming clearer," Idris said, his voice tinged with wonder. "It's almost like it's trying to communicate with us directly." Lyra stood, mesmerized, her mind grappling with the enormity of what was happening. "Is it speaking to us?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "It's not a language we know," Idris replied. "But there's a pattern. A sequence of pulses. I think it's offering us something, some sort of invitation." Lyra clenched her fists. "We can't leave without learning what it wants." She stepped forward, her voice firm. "We need to make contact. Whatever it is, we have to respond." The crew prepared themselves for what was to come, the air in the cockpit thick with anticipation. Outside, the structure's glowing surface rippled, responding to the ship's presence as if it was waiting for their next move. The Solara's systems went dark for a moment as the energy pulse from the structure surged. The crew braced themselves, unsure of what was happening. The air in the cockpit was thick with tension. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pulse subsided, and the ship's lights flickered back to life. "It's like it was testing us," Idris said, his voice low. "It wanted to see how we would react." Lyra's eyes darted between the console and the viewport, her thoughts racing. "We've passed the test, whatever it was," she said quietly. "Now we need to move forward." The signal from the structure had stopped, but the crew knew they were no longer merely observers. They had become part of something larger, something beyond their understanding. "What now?" Idris asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Lyra's gaze hardened. "Now we see what it wants from us," she replied, her voice resolute. The Solara moved forward, its course set by the mysterious signal that had drawn them in. The crew braced for the next phase of their journey. The Solara moved deeper into the unknown region, the alien structure now fading behind them as they ventured further into the cosmic abyss. The crew was on edge, unsure of what to expect next. The pulsing signal had stopped, leaving only silence in its wake. "What now?" Idris asked, his voice weary, but still laced with curiosity. Lyra stared ahead, her eyes focused on the dark expanse of space. "We continue," she replied, her voice firm. "Whatever it was that we encountered, it's only part of the larger picture." The ship glided forward, but the air inside the cockpit was heavy, thick with anticipation. The unknown stretched out before them, and the crew couldn't shake the feeling that something even more significant lay ahead. Lyra didn't look back. "We came this far and we're not turning back now," she said, determination in her voice. "There's something else out here. We'll find it. Together." The crew shared a quiet moment of resolve before returning to their tasks. The journey had only just begun. As the Solara continued its journey, the crew started to notice subtle changes in the ship's systems. The energy from the alien structure seemed to be lingering in the ship, affecting its performance in ways they couldn't explain. "We're receiving some unusual readings," Idris said, his voice tinged with concern. Lyra looked over at him, her brow furrowing. "What kind of readings?" she asked. Idris adjusted the sensors. "Energy levels are fluctuating, Captain. It's like we're still in the structure's influence. But it's different now. We're absorbing something." Lyra's mind raced. "Absorbing what?" she asked. Idris couldn't answer. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But whatever it is, it's not natural." Lyra stood silently for a moment, weighing their options. "We can't turn back," she said finally. "We need to know what's happening. Stay on course." The crew braced themselves as the ship continued on its path, knowing that whatever was unfolding, they would face it together. The mysterious energy continued to ripple through the Solaris systems, its effects becoming more pronounced. The lights in the cockpit flickered erratically, and the ship's engines hummed with a strange resonance. "This isn't just interference," Idris said, his voice tight with realization. "This is something else. It's like we're being changed." Lyra's face was etched with concern as she examined the console. "Changed how?" she asked. "I don't know," Idris admitted. "But the ship feels different, like it's responding to us, to me." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The air in the cockpit was thick with the realization that they were no longer in control, not fully. "It's the energy," Lyra said slowly. "It's altering our systems, our connection to the ship. It's adapting to us. But at what cost?" Idris asked, his tone low. Lyra shook her head. "We don't know yet, but we're going to find out." As the Solara moved further into the unknown, the ship's systems continued to shift, becoming more attuned to the energy they had encountered. "I think we're reaching a critical point," Idris said, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to make a decision. Either we embrace this power, or we risk losing everything." Lyra stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the view ahead. "We've come too far to back down now," she said. "We embrace it, but we do it on our terms." The crew worked together, each person adjusting the ship's systems to accommodate the changes. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, but there was no turning back now. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Outside, the stars seemed to grow brighter, as if the universe itself was watching them, waiting for the next step in their journey. The Solara surged forward, its course set by the strange energy that had been both their guide and their challenge. As the ship pushed through the unknown, the crew could feel the energy from the alien structure settling within them, becoming a part of the ship's very essence. "We're almost there," Lyra said, her voice tinged with awe. "This is the culmination of everything we've worked for." Idris nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "But at what cost, Captain? We've changed. The ship has changed." Lyra turned to him, her eyes steady. "We'll deal with that later. Right now we finish this." The ship moved faster, drawing closer to the heart of the unknown, where the answers they sought awaited them. Outside, the stars blurred as the Solara accelerated toward its destiny. The crew held their breath, ready for whatever awaited them on the other side.